vaguely aware that I had gotten just a touch of sulfuric acid on my pants. The pause was awkward. She wasn't ready to start her explanation quite yet, so she reached for the glass in front of her. It shook. Slightly at first, then badly enough to spill over the edges. She tried to hide it, failed, winced, and finally put the water down. Then she steadied her right wrist with her left hand, pressing it firmly against the desk to keep it from shaking. And in an instant, the invincible veneer was broken. I saw Dr. Scrit for who she was, a scared, mortal, sad person whose life was closer to the end than it was to the beginning, sufficiently powerful to control most people but not strong enough to master herself given how far she strayed from average. She was a bitch of her own volition, both because she was strong and because she was weak. "You've had a long night, Dr. Aphelis," she conceded in a measured voice. "Against great odds, I was wrong about how long someone like you would last at St. Francis." She sighed. "So tell me, why are you here?" I wondered, briefly, if some sort of supernatural paralytic had commandeered my vocal cords before realizing that she simply intimidated the shit out of me. "Fast answers are shallow ones, so I'll let you wait for another day to give me your answer. But it had better be good." She leaned back in her chair. "Now here's the thing. Most people love learning things the hard way, because they prefer to see if the rules of physics and common sense have changed to suit their own needs. Idiots are the reason that toasters have warning labels." She stared at me intently. "Don't waste my time, doctor. Capiche?" I nodded once. "Okay then," she breathed. "This is the day that I learned about rule number 7. You're giving me a school bus full of dead children on my first day as chief of medicine?" I asked a very pale Dr. Matthews. "Well, no, most of them are, well, they're alive for the moment, Dr. Scrit." I closed my eyes and allowed the lightning bolt of a pre-migraine to tear through my head unabated, lapping at the frayed gray matter of my skull like a cat teasing every drop of milk from the depths of his bowl with a sandpapery tongue. For 3 seconds. Then I breathed out calmly, accepting and embracing the lingering pain as a part of my psyche that would propel me forward. "How far out are the first ambulances?" Dr. Matthews swallowed. "They should be at St. Francis within 4 minutes. The same flood that washed out the bus has shut down the Interstate 77 bridge over the Elk River, so..." "Are you telling me that Charleston Area Medical can't take any of the kids?" Well, that's kind of exactly what I'm saying." My headache enriched. "How many surgeries are we going to need to perform?" I asked politely. He winced. "We're anticipating 12. 12? That storm is terrible. Why the hell was a school bus out in the..." "Never mind, let's get this circus tent pitched. We're very understaffed for this shit, and don't have nearly enough pediatric surgeons on a good day." I sighed deeply and ran the numbers in my head. Looks like a couple of interns are about to experience their first solo procedures. Dr. David Yangston had been a standout football player in high school, probably a quarterback, but failed to compete in college because he was unable to accept the fact that he could improve while still good enough to get away with that as a teenager. Dr. Andrew Branning was never good enough for his parents, so he pursued and achieved academic perfection instead of accepting the immutable fact that they would never be happy because he represented the wrong choices that mom and dad made when they were younger. I knew this about both of them without asking. They wore their stories on their faces, as all people do, and I had long ago decided to be literate enough to read every sad tale. We love mystery because it allows for the possibility that some unknown fable has the happy ending we couldn't find, all the while refusing to accept that people stop moving forward when they cease to believe in happy endings, or even worse, actually find one. You're too young to be leading a solo procedure, but these kids are too young to die, so we're choosing the lesser of two evils. We've got twin children, aged 8, and don't know much about them yet. Dr. Branning, your patient has sustained major abdominal wounds, and Dr. Yangston, yours has potential femoral lacerations. You'll find out more when they arrive." The doors burst open. Game time. A dozen children rolled out of the storm and into St. Francis that day. The incinerator was busy. I prayed to a devil I didn't believe in that my charges would minimize their fuck-ups. Yangston and Branning were the only first-year interns to get solo procedures, so I gave them the simplest cases. Moderate hemorrhaging, potentially from the femoral artery. "Let's find out what happened to this kid," Dr. Yangston announced through his surgical mask. "We've got signs of internal bleeding, let's put her under and find out what's wrong," Dr. Branning said quietly as he wiped the sweat from his brow. "We're losing a lot of blood, doctor," a nurse warned Yangston as he peered into the boy's split-open leg. There's only one of us with the title of doctor before his name, and that person needs silence to focus, nurse. I had already confirmed that Yangston had been slapped upside the head far too infrequently as a child, but was not about to reconcile this misfortune while he was wrist-deep in a split-open child. I looked over at Dr. Brandying. The B.P. is too high, drive, Nurse Alt explained calmly. 12/8, everything is fine, Brandying responded. I think your B.P. is too high, doctor. She winked. Relax, you got this. The sweat glistened on his forehead as he nodded. I glanced back around. He's lost nearly 1,000 milliliter of blood, doctor, we need to act now. Nurse, get the hell out of my OR, this is on me, and you're a bigger distraction than you or help. She turned and stalked off immediately, eyeing me angrily as she passed by Dr. Brandying's OR. The good news is that no major organs or blood vessels are damaged. The bad news is that this piece of metal is lodged deep in her spleen, Brandying noted. Remove the mesh, we need to do a splenectomy, and it has to be now. That's when Yangston's patient started coding. What the fuck is wrong with him? Blood loss is too great, doctor. I checked the blood loss, his numbers are fine. Those numbers are fine for an adult. Is this your first time working on a child? We performed the hemogram test, did you even check the results? Yangston's face turned bright red against the white surgical mask. You need to get the hell out of my OR, nurse. Your patient's coding. Now. My own heart had stopped at this point. I was plunged into complete vertigo when I heard Dr. Brandying's patient coding right behind me. What happened? You cut his splenic artery, doctor, Alt responded flatly. I'm sorry. He wailed. My hands were shaking, I'm so sorry. It's okay, doctor, but you need to anastomose the vessel, she responded in a soothing yet firm voice. Okay. I can't stop shaking. Just give me a second. We don't have a second, doctor, she's losing blood. Alt wiped the sweat from his brow. You can do this. Brandying was beginning to hyperventilate. Oh, God, I don't want to lose her. Let's make this happen. Across the OR, Yangston was flying. With both of his nurses gone, he was in complete control of the situation, hands moving everywhere they needed to go with admittedly surgical precision. It's a shame that he was 30 seconds behind schedule. We need a transfusion, he ordered. I turned to look back at Brandying. Alt was continually wiping both sweat and tears away from his face, but he was still struggling to see clearly. I could do nothing but stare at the crash cart as they both fought to perform the task that I had expected of them. I remember the ID number 8,251,913 dancing in front of me, because I would see those numbers again. The surgeries had been simple, but something told me one of them would fail. I hated the idea of intuition, but I couldn't shake it. Which did I believe would die? And which would I choose if I had to? Forcing an answer to those questions tells us a hell of a lot about ourselves. At any rate, intuition is bullshit. I cursed myself for believing in my emotions instead of simple reality. Mr. and Mrs. Arnaki, I'm Dr. Vivian Scrit. We did everything we could, but your children's injuries were just too great to overcome, and we lost them both. I'm so sorry. I'll give you a moment. I got up and left, because there wasn't a damn thing that my comfort could do. I had had an opportunity to change their world for the better, and I'd fallen short. The time for talking has passed if the moment for action has failed. Besides, I was still on the clock. But I was first in my class at UCLA. Dr. Yangston snapped, seething. People make mistakes all the time, you've been sued for malpractice. And I won those suits, while you've lost your appeal to avoid getting fired. As great as your intelligence is, it still can't fill your inflated head. He ripped off his surgical mask and threw it to the floor. Doesn't matter, he responded, glaring at me with pure hatred. I'm better than this shithole city anyway. I'll find someplace better and be grateful for it. I raised an eyebrow. Dr. Yangston, that procedure was simple. No matter how talented you were in another life, you're just a rookie who wasn't good enough and can't learn from mistakes. I leaned forward. The world is a better place without you as a doctor. I turned and walked toward the on-call room. Several surgeries were still underway, but I needed to talk with Dr. Brandying. I opened the door and found him kneeling by his locker, eyes bulging and face blue. A torn bed sheet reached from his closed locker door to the place where it wrapped tightly around his neck. I lunged forward in an attempt to loosen the slack. But the second I moved his body, I knew he was dead. After handling enough lifeless corpses, it's usually possible to tell if a body is haunted by the ghost of its sometime occupant, and I knew that Brandying was no longer a prisoner of himself. Still, I had to try. It took several seconds of fighting to untie the cord from his neck, and his lifeless body fell instantly to the ground once I was done. His head hit the bench with a sickening crack on the way down, but he didn't bleed. I had knelt on the floor to start CPR when I saw the half-empty bottle of pentobarbital by my feet. He had overdosed on enough barbiturates to fuck up a bull elephant. With every doctor in surgery, I tried by myself to restart his heart. I fought for several minutes in an attempt to find hope in a hopeless case. I failed. Seneca noted that difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body, which is why I'm one of the smartest doctors you'll ever meet, Dr. Scrit explained to me as she finished her story. I nodded slowly. Remember what I said about learning things the hard way? I blinked. She sighed. Did you know that people pay more attention to a list of rules when it's harder to access? But I was never given a list. And you earned a lot of gray hairs making sure that you learn them anyway, she smirked. What do you say when the person who pisses you off is utterly, totally, and completely right? I was silent. Which brings us back to rule number 7, she continued, folding her hands. Dr. Yangston was the brightest young mind we had recruited in 5 years. But the gravity of his task could not keep his arrogance in check, so he couldn't live up to the potential that the world demanded of him. She raised a shaking hand to her forehead and massaged her temple. Dr. Brandying could not look away from the gravity of the task in front of him, and that killed the arrogant confidence he needed to move on. So, I responded, finally finding my voice, are you telling me that I'm too arrogant, or too meek? She chuckled. Both. Then Dr. Scrit dropped her hands to the table, where one trembled just slightly in place. Do you see what this means? She shook her head. Don't answer that. Of course you don't. My face flushed as I remained silent. The reality, Dr. Aphelis, is that you need both weaknesses. I need someone in the operating room who knows that someone's world will thrive or collapse based on the smallest gesture, and who understands how terrible a thing any mistake is. Lifetimes change based on how good you are on any given day. When you fail through your own fault, yes, you will fail, and it will ruin someone's life. You need to have the arrogance to leave it behind you and change the world as though you believe the lie that no ghosts haunt your past. That is rule number 7. Can you do 2 contradicting things at once? Yes, I responded confidently. That's the correct answer, she smiled. And no, you can't. You'll find that out the hard way. Now get up, you're needed in surgery.